Good afternoon. It's my exquisite pleasure to interview Charlie Brooker for the alternative MacTaggart. I've got a ton of questions, but we'll have time at the end for a question and answer. So if you could have a think during this of things you might like to ask. Charlie, I'm going to take you back to the beginning.
Okay, is this a past life regression?
It's your childhood. Charlton Brooker, you were born in 1971. You grew up in Oxfordshire, in Brightwell-cum-Sotwell.
Brightwell-cum-Sotwell, yes, small village.
Your grandparents had a sweet shop.
Well, there was a sweet shop attached to our house.
Was that good?
It was. I mean, I was probably too young to appreciate it, but I used to eat chocolate button sandwiches a lot as a child, which is probably really bad for you, isn't it?
You went back and opened the shop recently.
I did have to go and open a village shop.
Yeah, I saw a picture.
That was quite bizarre with my old school biology teacher. That was like a therapy exercise.
It's this idea, when I look at your childhood, it's this like idyllic Middle England type childhood.
I guess, I mean...
What TV show was your childhood like?
What TV show was it like?
Yeah.
God, that's I should say something like World in Action, Panorama, a harrowing panorama. No, it was so. I think it was I had a fairly normal upbringing.
Keeping
I guess.
Up appearances.
Keeping up. No, not. I wouldn't. I couldn't liken it to. I couldn't liken it to any TV show because they tend to be more entertaining probably than my life. Sorry was filmed in the village where I grew up, actually. I think the exteriors of his house were a house in the village, so we used to see them sort of filming bits when I was growing up. So that would probably be the closest. Yeah.
But were you an angry, ranting teenager?
No, I don't know where. I tell you, I've always found anger funny in that certainly when I was a kid, if I watched shows like The Young Ones or Monty Python, there seemed to be an amused anger that was driving them, that seemed to be the energy behind them. And I always found that sort of thing hilarious. There's a great scene in one of the episodes of The Young Ones where Vivian starts ranting about the good life and starts physically ripping the screen apart, which sort of combined two of my favourite things in that it was a sort of funny rant, and it was completely breaking the fourth wall because he was sort of literally tearing the screen to pieces.
Did that have a massive effect on you? That part of The Young Ones? Because I mean, personally...
Yeah, I remember finding that really exciting to watch as well as very funny. I remember anything like that. Like my dad would sort of make me watch repeats of Monty Python and things like that were on, and not the 9 o'clock news when that was on when I was a kid.
So the TV that you were watching when you were younger was TV that referenced TV? You were into Kenny Everett?
Kenny Everett I used to really enjoy, yes.
Victor Lewis Smith? Victor
Lewis Smith stuff, yeah, I mean, well, I'm a sort of, yeah, he's kind of like a rich man's me, isn't he, Victor Lewis Smith, in a lot of ways. Victor Lewis Smith stuff, well, I mean, when I was young, it would have been things like Kenny Everett. There was a show on that was called End of Part 1, I think, which was a sketch show about television programs that was on ITV, I think, years and years ago, that was, I think, written by Marshall and Rennick, one of the guys one of them went on to do One Foot in the Grave. But it was all sketches about TV shows. And one episode I remember very clearly watching, and it just started with the London Weekend Television animated logo. You know, that thing that would go ding, 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 da, 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 da. And it just did that about 15 times in a row for no reason. And I remember finding that the most exciting thing. It was like someone had broken into the TV set and played with the...
So is this where your special relationship with television comes in? Because it's almost as if you see it as like a saviour and a escape method, an educator, a friend. Did you have one in your room at that point?
Sorry?
Did you have a TV in your room?
No, I didn't. I mean, when I was very young, I guess because where I grew up, I mean, it wasn't a particularly fancy existence I had in any way. I mean, we did, you know, there wasn't much to do really when you were a kid. You're in a small village, and so the TV was a kind of magical portal, I think, when I was young. And so I just found the mechanics of it fascinating. I just loved things like, I don't know what, I used to love the logos that would come. I don't like it now that channels all have these stupid little films instead of, what's wrong with a logo in the middle of the screen spinning around? Why do we have to watch some fucking hippos?
Who's the worst
or
channel?
People, it's all like, you know, some people fucking
What's the
doing
worst
feng
channel?
shui or whatever it is. Sorry?
What's the worst channel for doing that?
They're all the same. They've all got quirky little fucking films with people doing Tai Chi in a field or something, or...
Well, so you liked it when it was kind of like an orange
Sorry?
two, like, you know, like or an orange or
the
brown.
orange
yeah,
two,
yeah,
or like
beautiful.
TVS or Southern or that. What's wrong with that? And you know, there was just a logo that would talk to you, basically. That's what I used to like. I don't like all this cuddly, wuddly stuff. It's like all the idents for channels now, like the film they show to an old man near the end of Soylent Green, just as he's about to be killed, to make him feel slightly better about the dystopian world he's living in. I don't like. I'm getting quite angry.
You're quite. You're
It's
right.
the worst thing to happen to television in years. Those stupid fucking idents. They're all the same. I mean, they're meant to... Anyway.
When you were 15, you started submitting cartoons to Oink.
Oink comic, yes, which was...
Other contributors, Frank Sidebottom, Mark Riley, you sent them a cartoon to the letters page. You were invited to do your own strip.
Yeah.
You must have been pretty talented.
No, because I was not a very good cartoonist.
But you love animation now. You still love it, don't you?
Oh yeah, no, I love anime. I wish I'd sort of kept it up because
Yeah.
I just wasn't talented enough as an artist, and I hated doing the speech.
What did you send to Oink?
Oink was basically it was like a children's version of Viz. Effectively, it was a sort of unofficial kids version of Viz. I guess you'd say.
You went on to be rejected by Viz, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a painful moment. I sent some cartoons to them, and they sent them back saying, "Sorry, smells of bacon,"
What
because
happened?
I'd done some stuff for Oink.
Did you take it well?
No, because that was obviously their harmless joke, but I took it as a grievous insult, and I wrote a letter back saying, like, having a real arse at them, having a moan, and then I was too embarrassed for years afterwards to ever send something to them again. I tried sending cartoons to Private Eye and things like that, and they were always rejected. And then I started, because Oink folded, and then when I was a student, I started doing stuff for sort of bad Viz rip-off magazines. I did sort of, you get those things called sort of Spot and Sick, and all those things that in the 90s were clogging up all the shelves.
I've got this we'll talk about the 90s. I've got this theory that in the 90s, you were a bit of a slacker.
Yeah.
And
directionless.
I always think that but you are a bit of a good news story for people that are sitting here that maybe are feeling quite directionless. Can I read you some quotes out that I've heard you say about the 90s?
Yeah.
Well, one of them is, I spent my 20s working in shops writing game reviews through a haze of spliff smoke.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
I once put my TV on its side so I could watch it lying down without getting out of bed.
Yeah. That was after a bad breakup. And I have to say, why don't televisions have a mode that you can just push that flips the picture sideways when you're lying on the sofa?
How long
why
did
don't
you
they
stay
do
there
that?
for?
Sorry?
How long did you stay there for?
Oh, 72 hours? No, I don't know. Probably, I'm sure I didn't defecate. So, however long I don't know, biologically, however long it takes before you have to defecate. How long is that?
I don't defecate.
However long that was, that will have been how long I stayed there.
So you did a media degree?
I did a media studies degree at what was the Polytechnic of Central London when I started, and failed. I didn't like the media theory side of things. I didn't sort of get it. I just sort of didn't see the point in it, and I probably am too simple to follow it. And I was mainly interested in the theory side of things, because the practical side of things, where there was a TV studio there and we got to. For a project, I wrote a sitcom, and we sort of made a sitcom, and the practical side of things I found fascinating.
So you did that part?
I did that part, and I really slacked off. I couldn't even tell you. I can't really remember the whole of the other side of it.
What grade did you get?
Well, I didn't pass at all. I mean, I didn't.
Why not?
Because I wrote a dissertation, and without checking with anyone, I wrote it on video games. And you're talking about the Sega Mega Drive years. I'm sure you're big on that, yeah? Sonic the Hedgehog, Road Rash, and things like that. And I didn't check with anyone that was a suitable subject to write a dissertation on, and they rejected it out of hand. And I had 7 years to write a follow-up, and then I would have got my degree, but by then I just didn't but I couldn't see the point.
Do you regret that?
No. Well, I mean, yes, I do. Yes, I regret the fact that I spent 3 years there and then didn't walk out of there with a degree. But I don't regret not writing a follow-up dissertation, because that would have been a waste of time. I don't know how it would have impacted on my life in any. Maybe if I'd passed, I wouldn't have been so directionless in the 90s. I don't know, but I think that came through because I didn't really know. I sort of knew vaguely what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be doing funny things, and I wanted to write scripted things. I mean, like being a presenter or something like that, or fronting things wasn't really on my radar.
There's this temptation to see you as that suddenly you became this kind of amazing success and this entrepreneur, and you were right in the dead center of the media and you knew everybody, but you spent an awful long time as a complete outsider during your 20s.
I suppose I suppose I lacked a lot of confidence. I always think, I didn't go to public school, which I think always gives you a sense of, that people think, rightly or wrongly, I think it gives people a sense of that they belong, or that the world is theirs to just play with in some way, which I didn't have that sense. And because I didn't go the Oxbridge route, I think maybe if I'd done that, I'd have, I don't know, bumped into a fucking comedy troupe or something like that, do you know what I mean? And started doing things earlier. But I didn't do any of those things, so I didn't know. I had no clue quite how to get into what I wanted to do.
But while the Oxbridge people were leaving uni and they were coming and taking their one-man show to Edinburgh, or they were starting their BBC internships or whatever, you were sitting at home smoking spliffs and playing video games.
Yeah, because I didn't know what else to do.
But do you not think that really influenced what you've done since? Because, you played a hell of a lot of video games.
But I had to, because I was reviewing them.
Do you think it desensitized you? I'm not going to talk about the pig fucking.
No, I don't think it did.
Anyway.
I mean, I don't think, I certainly wasn't alone in playing a lot of PlayStation games in the 90s and stuff.
But not that many people then went on to make so much television. I mean, I noticed this as well, like Rob Florence that works for...
Yes,
because he's
Pennsylvania and
a similar type of character.
I guess, I don't know, I think really, if my 90s influenced me in any particular way, it was that I certainly felt at the time, I can understand a certain mindset that people can have when they're watching TV. I spent a lot of time in the 90s watching TV, and it would cause me a lot of pain in that I would think either, fuck, I wish I was doing that. That's rubbish. I could have done better than that. These bastards. And I'd assume that everybody on screen was like patting themselves on the back and walking around thinking they were the absolute bee's knees. Or I'd watch things and think they were brilliant and be depressed and think I could never do anything as good as that.
So TV was just pain?
It was sort of causing me pain.
Which you loved, but it was pain?
I had a love-hate relationship with it, I guess.
So other people were kind of in the Groucho and making connections and making their first films, and you were contributing a cartoon called Cyber Twats to PC Zone?
Yes. But then I suppose it was I found... I suppose looking what happened, what started happening was because then when I did start sort of getting, when I started being in a position where I was being asked to do shows or doing things like that, I think I felt that because I'd wasted so much time in the 90s that I had to sort of, do you know what I mean? I was making up for lost time and frenziedly trying to do as much things as I could, and I think that's what I've been doing for the last 6-7 years.
Was there a catalyst? What came along? Was it a woman, or was it a job, or what?
Why altered my...
Yeah.
I think I was lucky in that. Well, the catalyst was the thing that changed what I was doing was I was writing video games reviews. It was a lot. I've gone through a random career path where I was a cartoonist, then I was doing comic strips. When I was working in the video game shop, I was doing these adverts for them, which were comic strips. Then an editor at a video games magazine liked them, asked me to do a comic strip. That led to me being invited to write some reviews for the magazine. And I thought, I'm not qualified. I can't. I sort of felt like I didn't have the right to write a fucking review of a computer game.
Were you scared to write?
I thought.
Were you scared to give it in?
Yeah, because I thought this would be rubbish, and then they liked it and printed it, and then that carried on. And that led to me doing a radio...
Did you once have a meeting with an agent as well around that point, and they offered you something with cartoons and you just couldn't do it? You were just... with Noel Gay?
I sent a script to, I think it was to Noel Gay, saying a sitcom script. I wrote a sitcom script. I can't even remember what it was about, but I sent it off to an agent. Because I'd buy the Writers and Artists Yearbook and think, how do I get into it? I'll write a script and send it to an agent. And they came back and said, we think this is funny, but why don't you write about something you know? What do you do? And I was like, well, I work in a sort of second-hand video game shop. They went, perfect, write about it. And then I was too scared to write. I don't know why.
How old are you?
I must have been in my mid-20s, 25, 26, I'm guessing.
When did you start working with Gia Milovich on The Kit? Because that's like that was a BBC knowledge programme about...
That was when people ask me about what's it like going from being a TV critic to on screen, I think, well, I was on screen before I was writing about television. Because yes, I was doing a radio show that was about technology, and that transformed into a sort of TV version, which I was co-hosting with Gia Milinovic. And if you look at tapes of that, which I've attempted to have burnt, I'm kind of like a sort of bad Johnny Vaughan clone or something. I've got a shaved head, and I'm kind of talking like that all the way through, because that's how I thought presenters had to speak. And I'm kind of going, here's the PlayStation chart this week. And I kind of enjoyed it, and I thought maybe I'll end up doing that.
But like, there must be a lot of people that are here that are students, and they're probably doing these tiny projects here and there and making web films and things, but there's an importance in that, isn't there? I mean, that's what you're saying. You went and you did all these tiny things.
Yes, because...
And at one point they all...
What happened was when I was around the time I was doing the radio show and doing that, I started doing a website called TV Go Home. And the reason I did that was because I was doing comic strips. I had a comic strip website, but I hated doing the fucking speech bubbles, and they took so long to do. I wanted to do something that was small and regular it was basically a sort of motivational means, because I felt I was wasting my time, and I thought if I can commit to doing one thing a fortnight, this one page of spoof TV listings a fortnight, I'll actually feel like I've actually achieved something. So I started doing this thing. But because I was working at the BBC, I remember somebody said to me, you'll get fired.
Well, you were basically working for the BBC, and then you mocked up a load of Radio Times
listings
with the word cunt all over them. So, like,
and to start
was it Gia that told you to not do that?
It was
so you had to
Rachel Reynard, who was my co-presenter on the radio version, said you'll be, because she pointed out I was using actual BBC branding on it. You know, put BBC One at the top of it, and then write this obscene listing underneath. And she said, you'll get fired immediately. This was around the time they were shooting people in the neck for doing spoof Teletubbies websites and things like that. And so I made it anonymous, because I wanted to carry on doing the site. And the fact that I made it anonymous gave it a weird cachet, I think, that people thought it was more sophisticated than it was, or I don't know what. But that led to me getting sort of offers of TV writing work.
Before we talk too much about TV Go Home and where that went to, I wanted to talk to you because you TV writing work. Your first experience of walking into the writing room, and that willy waving experience that it is. Was
I remember
you went in the 11 o'clock show.
The 11 o'clock show, because of TV Go Home, I was asked to come. You know, I sent some stuff off, and they wrote back and said, "Well, why don't you come in and we'll try you out for a bit." And I'd only seen like a couple of episodes, and they gave me a tape. I remember they gave me a tape and said, "Watch this." And I watched one, and it was not very good. It was not a very good episode.
Who was on it?
Oh, who was in it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was
Ian Lee at that point, wasn't it?
Yes, it was Ian Lee, and they were fine. It was just I sort of thought this is all a bit. I don't know. There was something about it. I sort of thought. I kind of arrogantly thought. I bet I can do better than that. I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to be like, which is like I'm usually fairly lacking in confidence. But I sort of thought I'm going to walk in there and wipe the floor with everyone. And I remember very clearly sort of strolling in on the first day and sitting down for a writer's there was a meeting in the morning
Who
with
was
everyone sitting
there?
around.
Is it names that we would know now?
Well, all the other, I mean, like there were all the other sort of Zeppo lot were there, and there were lots of writers, but there was it wasn't like Sacha Baron Cohen was sitting at the table or Ricky Gervais, although they were on the show. They weren't there at this particular meeting. But I remember very clearly the newspapers were delivered, and everyone started just effortlessly being incredibly clever and funny around the table to such a degree I was stunned into silence.
Did you feel like you were drowning?
Yeah,
I think we were talking about backstage about that drowning feeling when you're
yes,
it's like
if you go on a panel show and everyone's being very witty and you feel like you're the mute at a dinner party. And it was like that. And I'd even arrogantly thought of some funny things to say on my way into that office. And I seem to remember, I can't remember what it was, I think I'd walked past, they were constructing the Millennium Wheel, something like that. And I seem to remember something, it was as lame as thinking something like some sort of hamster wheel joke. And I seem to remember somebody in this meeting even going, somebody's fucking suggesting the shitty fucking hamster joke again, or something like referring to this joke that I'd thought in my head. And I thought, I can't say anything. I remember thinking everyone in television is a lot cleverer than I thought. Which I think is an assumption you can make often if you're watching something at home and you think this isn't, you're not aware of the layers of sort of compromise or change or weird random reasons why things have to change that are in between the human brain and the screen, if you see what I mean.
Well, this is your first experience of that, the fact that TV comedy is a lot of compromise. It's a lot of sometimes taking your eye off the ball and watching your perfect, beautiful joke die. But then often you have to. I mean, whenever you write, I'm possibly jumping ahead here a bit, but whenever you write something, there's always then the harrowing process of later. If you're writing anything scripted, there's the harrowing process where you sit down with the producer and go through, right, we've got to cut back. So does this scene have to be in the kitchen? Does it have to end in the stadium full of people? Can it be set in a cupboard? Do you need this character, or can she be talking to her own hand? It's that sort of, like there's those layers, but they're often insanely sort of dead set. When we did Dead Set, there was supposed to be 1,000 zombies and a tower falling down, and constantly you're having to prune things out or cut things back. But with something like the 11 o'clock show, I think there it was more, it was because I think there was an assumption that the viewer was a particular type of person who'd sort of slightly come in from the pub and wouldn't understand certain things or didn't want to hear certain types of joke. And that I found very frustrating. It wasn't like I was trying to get some ornate intellectual tapestry on the air. I think it was partly I was so new to telly, I didn't understand that you had to. I didn't understand that a lot of TV seems to involve imagining what a fictional person is thinking. Who's this fictional viewer sitting at home and trying not to scare them out of the room or to confuse them for even 10 seconds. Do you care about the fictional person?
Well, yes and no. In that I certainly think that if you don't care about them at all, you might just end up being self-indulgent and long-winded. But on the other hand, when I was a kid, I would watch Monty Python or not the 9 o'clock news, and I'd have no clue what they were talking about, but I sort of wanted to know, or I enjoyed the fact that I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? In some way. I remember getting really hung up in some slightly Rain Man-ish way over the word zoetrope, which is the Victorian thing that you spin round and watch. I'm now patronising you by explaining what a zoetrope is.
It's okay.
But I remember having that word in a script and being told no one knows what a zoetrope is, take it out. And I was like, but it doesn't matter, does it? What's going to happen? Is the viewer going to stand up and throw shoes at the screen in disgust if they don't understand one word? That annoyed me.
We'll talk about how you learned not to compromise. And I think that's to do with when you started to work with Chris Morris.
It's right, yes, sorry, I was trying to drown myself. Yeah.
Before that, can we go and go back and talk a bit about TV Go Home? Because I think that's a really, I think that TV Go Home kind of it started to make you a bit of a cult figure. Because you were, you know, it's like you were anonymous. I mean, looking now, you're anonymous for a reason. It was just to kind of...
Cowardice.
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of made it... But this, you know, and it, you know, I think it spawned a million angry teenagers who wanted to be you know, because you seemed to... Well, I mean, you were like this kind of... You did become slightly a messiah around this point.
Certainly not in my own head, I think.
Not in your own head, but you know...
And doing TV Go Home led to me that was why The Guardian got in touch as well and said, will you write some things for us? And that sort of led to me getting the
What parts of TV Go Home are you most proud of?
Oh God, I liked all the Nathan Barley listings because it's, for me there, I mean again, it crystallises the thing for me in that I think people often think I'm more opinionated than I am. I find anger funny. And so often I'm exaggerating. And with TV Go Home, there were these listings about the character Nathan Barley, which were just sort of hate being vented for a fictional character. And it was so over the top.
But who was he? Where were you going at that point where you were seeing this guy?
I think it was
because he was like he was a young...
type. Well, he wasn't. I tell you what, he wasn't. He wasn't a Shoreditch type because I'd never been to Shoreditch or Hoxton or anywhere like that.
So where did you see it? Where were you hanging out?
It was slightly more. It was because when I was going to or from work, when I was working in the computer exchange, I'd see a lot of I remember having to go in on Sundays and things like that, and going past. It was around the time when people started standing outside pubs. Do you know what I mean? People would stand outside pubs, and there were just a lot of posh people standing braying outside pubs, and they used to really anger me. And they would, because they seemed to be having an easy life. I'm sure they weren't, but at the time I thought, you're having an easy... Stop fucking pretending you're writing a screenplay, you liar. You're standing there with a fucking beer in your hand while I'm going to... And I think I just had a chip on my shoulder, to be honest.
But you were still very much an outsider at that point, weren't you, in media? But this is where you were really, this was complete, pure, unfettered anger and hatred in a lot of TV Go Home. It was angry.
Yes, it was, but it was always,
but you didn't ever have to come to somewhere like here or go into the Groucho or Soho House in London, so you didn't see any of these people. So this was freedom, like... But
then I've always been, I've always been fairly phobic about sort of any events where you might bump into people. Do you know what I mean? So I like to not have contact with people.
Did you have boundaries then, though?
No, I think what it was I was so... The anger in there was deliberately exaggerated. I just find the disproportionate layer of... The levels it would reach, I would find hilarious.
And Daily Mail Island?
Daily Mail Island was... Well, that was just absurd. That was a funny idea.
Did your parents read the Mail?
No. No, my parents are quite... I grew up in a Quaker household. Both my parents are quite... Not really... my grandparents were... both ran a Quaker meeting house. And you can't get much more liberal than Quakers. I used to get Young Quaker magazine sent to me because my name must have been on a list. And Young Quaker magazine was a fuck of a read. It had poems in it and photographs of people in woolly jumpers playing the guitar.
But surely Quakerism is thoughtful, silent, thinking before you speak. What do they think of you?
Well, they're very liberal, so they'd be... I don't know. You'd have to go and ask the Quakers.
I will.
They don't dress up in those fucking smocks, like on the porridge box. That's the one question that people always ask me about being a Quaker.
But then that obsession or that anger, that vitriol about the Daily Mail, that still carried on because that was one of your most beautiful moments on 10 o'clock live last year, wasn't it?
I suppose. Well, I mean... I don't know. I mean, originally that idea of the Daily Mail Island, that was the idea where it was an idea for a reality show where you kept people on an island and their only access to any form of media was copies of the Daily Mail, and then quite quickly they devolve into a strange, fearful society that I think they catch a 15-year-old girl masturbating and they shove her in a coffin full of broken glass and dog shit and push her off a cliff. So obviously that's I would say, unsubtle satire. And I don't know, it's just the absurdity of that is just funny. I mean, often I think that
But
things I do...
would you write that now?
I think so, because I just find the absurdity of that image quite amusing.
Well, I suppose it was, like watching that clip there where someone's, drop kicking a baby.
Mm.
And
But it's a plastic baby.
would you write that now?
Yeah, in fact, I wrote a thing just the other day where someone drops a baby on a stone floor and was asked to take it out. But it's not a real baby. I do draw the line there. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't think, I suppose I don't think that I do anything particularly, my motive is always to entertain people rather than, I don't think I'm some man on a mission trying to, do you know what I mean, trying to set the world to rights. I'm always just trying to entertain people ultimately. And I don't think I really challenge what people think anyway. Usually if people read my columns or something like that, they often say, oh, I agree with that. So I haven't, it's not like I've told them anything they don't know. It's not like I change anyone's mind.
This is it, you are, and I mean this genuinely, you are eternally very humble about what you've created, you are. And I mean, it was around this time.
I think I'm accurate, though, but, sorry.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it was around this time when you were working on TV Go Home, and Chris Morris, did he get in touch, or did you met him through a friend,
we met
boyfriend?
Through Gia Milinovich.
Yeah.
Because at the time she was going out with the director of Brass Eye. And so we met socially. And he'd seen TV Go Home, and we started talking about Nathan Barley as a thing. And then he got interested in doing the...
Well, he loved TV Go Home.
He contributed a couple of things to it, because we'd have anonymous contributors, and so he contributed a couple of ideas to the listings. I can't remember half of them now. I think it was one where a lot of people on a bus got machine gunned or something like that. And we started talking about Nathan Barley, and then he started doing the Brass Eye paedophile special. Mm. So that was quite interesting. In that...
Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yeah, I was terrified.
You must have been a fanboy.
Oh yeah, no, I was a total fan, and I met him like round at Gia's flat, and there was a sort of...
Do you remember what you said to him?
God, no, I'm sure it's... Well, what I remember very clearly, that he bounded in, and because he's like just, I would say the word I would use is jolly, in person, and, well, he's got two modes. He's got normal social jolly mode, and he's got when he's focusing on something work-wise. What I think I learned from him was that he cannot believe it if somebody's saying to him you can't do that. I think it drives him fucking insane, and he's determined to. If you told him you can't drive that car vertically up the side of that building, that's impossible, he would somehow manage to prove you wrong, I think. And so what I took from that was that's why his shows had and have and things that he does have such a strong flavour, was that he was obsessed with the minute you cede sort of control on anything, I think is his position, is the point at which things start souring.
And you were saying, calling people up at 2 o'clock in the morning or having an idea and just being bloody-minded.
You'd get sort of text messages off him at all hours of the day. I mean, when we were doing Nathan Barley, I remember we had a conversation that was hours about typefaces on a poster that was in the background of a shot. And that's great for me because I love typefaces and I can talk about them for hours, but I can understand that might strike some people as an insane level of detail.
But I remember you going off at this time and kind of having meetings with him, which always seemed really strange to me. I always used to think that you were like these two spies sitting on a bench somewhere, kind of trading ideas. I couldn't quite see how you...
would always sit in his office in Poland Street, and it was always just funny. It was always just what if this happened and what if that happened.
And that grew into Nathan Barley?
Yeah. That grew into, and that had a very long gestation period, as I think most of the things he does tend to have. And at several points during that, I thought, well, this is clearly never going to happen. But he works with people he sort of does things in a very different way to me in a lot of ways, in that he will research things for years before doing them. And, he's very good, because he's a director as well, he's very good at working with actors, and so he'll sort of mould a part around an actor. Whereas I can't really I don't have that skill set. I hate people who say skill set. I just said it. I hate me.
But you have got a skill set.
I've got a selection of things. I've done a lot of different things, so I guess I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, because I've done, you know, I've written fictional, I've presented things, I've written fiction, I've written, you know, so does that count as a skill set? Doing lots of different things?
Well, you're here.
Yeah, that's a sort of, yeah, I don't know why. What the fuck are you lot looking at? It's a bit weird, isn't it?
Should we move on to Screen Wipe?
Screen Wipe is, yeah, that came about in a weird way, actually.
Well, I mean, we should talk about Zeppatron, really, because that's, you know, I mean, you've got your own production company. Is that because you're an amazing businessman?
Yeah. No, I don't know. That happened sort of almost by accident. I think that we were writers on the 11 o'clock show, and it was sort of somebody else's suggestion, really, to start with, that I don't think any of us are business brains, you know, so it's sort of quite random. I think it looks on paper probably like I'm, you know, or that we're all like super sharp business heads who know what, I don't have a fucking clue about any of that side. I'm rubbish at sort of going to board meetings. I don't know what else is going on.
Because there's people here who are thinking of setting up their own production companies, or maybe just... should you do that? Do you recommend that?
I recommend it certainly in terms of meet someone who knows what they're doing. Someone else who knows what... If you're anything like me, if I didn't know other people who knew what they were doing, I'd be fucking hopeless. It's certainly good in that it means that I have, you know, a degree of autonomy over what I'm doing that would be... I probably got that sooner. If Screen Wipe had come about via a company I wasn't involved in, and it was just another production company had come to me and said, will you front this thing? I wouldn't have had enough sway to say how I thought it should work. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas because I was in a position where I was having to effectively make it with everyone else, I was having to make those decisions. And before you know it, you realise you do have strong opinions on how everything should work within the programme. And as a result, you get a better show. So you do get a lot more, you have control over what you're doing. And so, you know, certainly compared to my early experiences of writing for TV, that was what that was all about, was just having more say in what you're doing. So, I'd recommend it certainly in that respect, because otherwise no one would put up with me. Do you know what I mean? If they didn't have to. I think, because I can, you know, I hand everything in at the last minute. I'm obsessive over, you know, everything over. I probably do more than people expect. It looks, you know, something like Screen Wipe probably looks a lot easier than it is. I'm sure that's.
Well, you're powered mainly by a terrifying deadline.
I can't. Yeah, I'm awful.
How long did it take you to write the last 2 episodes of Dead Set?
Oh well, certainly one episode of Dead Set was written in a day, in my pants. I think on my birthday, in tears. Literally in tears. I think I phoned up Annabelle Jones, who's RMD, and I claimed I was having a breakdown and couldn't do it.
But you probably were having a minor breakdown. That's a lot of pressure. But you know,
I'd put myself in that position,
especially when it's come to Dead Set. I mean, Dead Set, we'll talk about Dead Set in a minute, but that's a massive production. I mean, at least with Screen Wipe, it was four or 5 people.
Yeah.
Screen Wipe was, you know, that was very representative of how you were as a person.
But that came
around
about,
that point. Because,
that came about by accident. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I was going to say, because this is a lot about you. You know, you filmed a lot of that in your own living room in the middle of the night, because, you know, how Screen Wipe was 30 minutes, but there was 6 minutes of contributions, and then you did the rest.
Yeah, there was a lot every week. I mean, and a lot of it was you being filmed. You used to film yourself. I mean, this is the road to madness. Well, I did. There was. I mean, how it came about, it was weird how it came about, because originally the idea was, I think there was just a pitch document that was like, we'll do Screen Burn as a TV show. Can we do that in some way? And there was a document full of things, you know, with a made-up running order, full of things that never ever fucking happened in the final show. And I think at the time, initially the BBC wanted it to be a bit more almost Top Gear isn't quite right, but literally wanted me to be in a house. And it's like, hey, everyone, I'm having a TV party, come in. And I'd have guests sitting there and we'd watch telly and then I'd turn around and chat to them and stuff. And I remember saying, how's that going to work? Because I don't like, people don't come round my house and, you know, I don't really, how do I talk to other people? That's a bit weird. And then something changed at the BBC and it was like for a while there was no one in charge of this show that had been commissioned, and they'd commissioned 3 low-budget pilots for BBC 4, which was something they were doing at the time. And so we just had to make these 3 shows. We had to settle on some way of doing it. And we couldn't work out how to do the reviews. And then I can't remember how it came about, whether it was Al Campbell, the director, maybe, or Derek McLean, who was the producer, or someone suggested, why don't you just read one of your columns? We'll give you a PD 150, and I put it in the corner of my flat, and then had a laptop, and I read one of the columns out, and like looking down the lens every so often, and then they edited it together, and that's how what became a signature part of the show came about by accident, with not long to spare before we were transmitting the first one. So
well, I mean, when you...
And it was just me, and usually they were recorded at 5 in the morning. I'd literally come back from the edit at like 2, 3 a.m. and sit in my living room late at night. There's one, and sometimes horrific things would happen. One time when we were recording it and a giant spider ran across my floor and I just fucking started screaming. Another time it was really late and I hadn't really slept, and it was just me on my own sitting there talking, going mad. And when I'm recording Screen Wipe, when I was at home, what I'd see on the TV was the feed from the camera. So I'd actually see me on the telly. That was where I was looking for reference.
But you used to get into a loop sometimes, didn't you? You just go into a loop.
Oh God, I'd go. Well, I thought I could see someone standing behind me on the screen, like in Ring or something, the horror movie. And there's a tape somewhere of me fucking really scared. But people always used to ask if it was a set. Like I mean, when we did that 2011 one, that was filmed on a set. When we did How TV Ruined Your Life, we graduated to a set because if it was a set, you'd make it look a bit more interesting than this sort of beige wall with a shitty shelf.
Were they happy times, if you think?
Well,
because that was very much you. You know, people used to say to me, "What's he like?" I say, "He's like that."
Do you think? Because I think I'm much more... I don't think I'm as opinionated.
You were a single guy living in that flat.
I see that as a persona,
and that's what you were,
I see that Screen Wipe persona as... Certainly when I did, for instance, You've Been Watching on Channel 4, the panel show, I know quite a lot of people said, I don't like it, he fucking smiles. He smiles at people. Because obviously I was in a different mode. When I was doing Screen Wipe, I'm kind of playing a part. Do you know what I mean? I'm exaggerating my deadpan misanthropic nature. No one could be that misanthropic. Do you know what I mean? Well, they can, but I feel very deeply sorry for them. You know, it was partly, a lot of it was a performance.
We'll talk briefly about You Have Been Watching. How on earth did you end up as a panel show host giving out points?
I don't know. I was asked.
You don't even really. You don't like being on panel shows, do you?
Well, I do and I don't, in that it's, I think being on a panel show is always, you feel like you're having a nervous breakdown. And I can't actually often, when I'm on them, understand what people are saying, even though I can, it's hard, you understand what they're saying. If they say something funny, you understand it's a joke and you laugh. But if somebody stopped time and said, what did they just say? You'd go, I don't fucking know, shoot me. But that was basically, You've Been Watching came back, somebody said, it was somebody else's idea. And they said, will you host it? And I thought, my initial thought was no, and then I think probably vanity got in the way, and I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go, because I sort of like the idea of trying different things. So that was certainly interesting. I can't believe I used to get scared before doing it, because it wasn't live. So when you when you start doing live things, you realise that was a piece of piss in comparison, because doing something live, you could have a breakdown and completely end your career and your life. Live on the telly. You could just start screaming horrific racial abuse or something and looking at your phone screaming your coordinates for people to come and attack you. God, I wish I'd never thought that, because that's something I could do.
Well, do you think it was that you were doing this comedy and then you ended up as like a panel show host? That was a different type of exposure as well, because suddenly you're the main man, and everyone's going, oh, fuck, he
Well,
smiles, and then suddenly you kind of disappear and do Dead Set, which is a drama, and is something completely different.
Yeah.
I was
don't like
personally
doing this.
surprised and shocked when you did Dead Set.
Well, Dead Set, we'd been trying to do Dead Set for quite some time as well. That had been bubbling away since Nathan Barley, I think. But certainly, when I did lots of series of Screen Wipe, and then I'd think this is not worthy enough, so then I'd do News Wipe. And then when I was doing News Wipe, I'd think, God, this is all a bit, I'm fed up with having to watch the news constantly. So we'd go back to doing some Screen Wipe, because that was a bit more frothy. Do you know what I mean? And I don't like doing one thing I think I get bored. And certainly when I was doing, in a panel show persona, I do remember having a weird moment of sitting behind a desk, and behind the desks of any TV show it always looks really shitty, and I just remember feeling quite false and quite like a game show host, and there's something slightly at odds with me in that.
And you had
position.
to change your appearance around now.
Well, I think people made more of that. Yeah, I stopped shaving and I grew my hair a bit.
Yeah, you had your teeth done a bit.
Oh, no, that was different. No, I once had my teeth whitened because I quit smoking, and I thought, this will stop me starting again. But never get your fucking teeth whitened. It was agony. The most painful thing I've ever... It was like Marathon Man. It was horrible. Turn your phone off!
Dead Set is going back to your obsession with television. I mean, it's television going very wrong, going awry rather, and also this obsession you had with Big Brother around that point as well.
It was a sort of love-hate relationship with Big Brother going on, where I would write scathing critiques of all the housemates in the Guardian, and yet get completely sucked into watching it myself. And I was interested in how... I remember watching the series when Maxwell and Saskia were on, and I hated Maxwell so much. It was...
Was that series 7?
It was a ridiculous
5?
thing.
Series 5?
I can't... 5. It was the one where science was... I loved science. I hated Maxwell. I remember finding it fascinating that I hated him so much, and then when he was evicted and he's interviewed, he suddenly seemed like a reasonable bloke. You think, what the hell I was just under some trance. So a lot of the characters in Dead Set were based on...
well, you ended up being friends with Aisling.
Aisling, yeah, she's quite. Well, you've met Aisling. She's quite amusing. She sort of doesn't take herself very seriously. She was in Dead Set playing a zombie version of herself.
Yeah.
As well.
But before you went, you had to go and basically befriend everybody at Big Brother and say, Davina, will you be in this, and can we use your set? And you've been quite mean about everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd written some stuff about Davina before, and then you meet people, and it's always the way that if you've written something nasty about somebody and then you meet them, the nastier you were, the more reasonable and pleasant they turn out to be. Now, I don't know if that's maybe they've read what you wrote, and so they're going out their way to make you feel guilty and awful, but I think it's just because you can never predict what somebody is actually like from their on-screen persona, I think. That was. It's always a bit.
Do you think,
weird.
out of everything you've done, are you proudest of Dead Set?
I don't know if I'm proudest of it. I'm certainly proud of it in that I felt it was a risk for me to do something that was supposed to be frightening and exciting, and not just sort of was blackly comic, but was meant to be, moody and dramatic and frightening and scary and entertaining. I thought I could really get crucified if this goes wrong, and I was very pleased with how it came out. Do you know what I mean? We always imagined we were making a film, so that was always a good mindset to be in, was just to imagine you're trying to make it was sort of, and it was written as a... It was written to unfold like I was sort of kept thinking of things like 24, when you'd get a good episode of 24 that would just drag you along. So I was sort of almost copying things like that.
Right, how do I say this without swearing too much? How do you... This surely must be a lesson to a lot of people who are sitting here, who have got to go in and pitch things that are difficult, pitch things that people don't want to take a risk with. How did you get the national anthem made? Does everybody know what happens in the national anthem?
Well, yeah, the Prime Minister is faced with a blackmail.
And what is the blackmail?
He's told that he must have sex with a pig on live television. And there's a very specific set of instructions, which at one point you can pause it and have a look. We thought it through. I mean, he's got to see it through to fruition. So I had to... Well, blackmail had already...
I think my main question is that I've always wanted to say, Charlie, why?
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 Because I thought it was a funny idea. It came out... Originally, it came out of thinking that this is a funny idea. Like, years ago, I'd thought of it as it would be a funny spoof thriller.
But Charlie, is it funny? that's awful.
Well, no. Well, then that's what happens in the show.
Yeah.
In the show, what it ended up illustrating was that the minute you think, right, we're treating this as though it's real, that you think, well, this is, I was thinking about sort of humiliation culture that we've got going on, that, it's a thing that if you were told the Prime Minister has to have sex with a pig, a lot of people's immediate reaction would be, lol! And then the grim reality of something of that nature, it's not so funny when you're the person on the receiving end. So, and I thought it was interesting in that to make the Prime Minister becomes a sympathetic character, which weirdly is not something you often see, I think, is a sympathetic politician, full stop. But a sympathetic Prime Minister, so by the time he's being led to the studio with a pig in it, it's like he's being dragged away to be shot. It's the worst thing that could happen, and you've seen that his wife is torn apart by it. That it's not just a funny fucking laugh for everyone to giggle about.
So who was the first person you told this idea to at Channel 4?
Jay Hunt. I had to say this. Basically, Black Mirror had already been commissioned, but there was a sort of problem with, there was an episode that was written, there was another episode we wanted to do that we weren't going to do. We needed to come up with another story. And I had this in my back pocket as a thought, was, what if that idea I'd had yonks ago, what if that would work? It would make more sense in this Twitter era, And so during a conversation, I said, what if? Here's a thought. Picture the scene. And I just said, what if... I described kind of what the first 10 minutes of the show are. And she laughed, but also thought it was interesting. And I think... And there was Aaron and Shane Allen, at Channel 4, and at the end of the meeting, the consensus was that I should go away and write a bit of it to see how it felt. There was a whole conversation, does it have to be a pig?
What could it have been?
Well, we went through supermarket chicken, that's just ridiculous. Lots of different animals, all seemed wrong.
Why did it have to be a pig?
Because it just felt right. You'd have to ask the Prime Minister how it actually felt. And anything else, a sheep would have been too comic. Do you know what I mean?
But,
it's the right level of disgust and sort of absurdity.
But Charlie, there's going to be, tonight in the bar, there'll be 1,000 of those conversations where somebody will pitch something and there'll be very good ideas and everyone will say it's a great idea and everyone will nod and be positive and then nothing will happen. How did that happen?
Well, then I went off and I wrote the first scene, which is the Prime Minister being confronted with the...
Sorry, I'm being...
Right. I'll say very quickly. I wrote the first scene very quickly and emailed it straight to Jay and Shane, basically. And I think that was what sold it, was actually seeing it written down as a script.
Yeah.
they were intrigued enough by the idea, because you had to get across what the tone of it was, that it wasn't a sort of romp. The Sun printed it as Channel 4 are going to broadcast a drama in which the PM has a romp with a pig. I thought, the last thing it wasn't romping. If it was romping, he wouldn't have been able to fucking stop him running down that corridor, or clicking his heels, couldn't wait to get stuck in.
Charlie. James, were you telling me that I am completely out of time? No time for Q&A?
Oh, well, if anyone's got any questions, you'll have to email them to me.
You don't answer email.
I don't answer email. I don't. It's true, I don't answer email or respond to phone messages.
Charlie, you've been wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for answering all those questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Brooker.